Imagine a land of deep forests and proud tribes. This was Gaul, long before it became France. Many different peoples lived here. They had their own customs, their own gods, and their own chieftains. They were brave warriors, skilled craftsmen, and they loved their freedom above all else. But this ancient world was about to change forever. A powerful Roman general, Julius Caesar, arrived with his legions. He came to conquer. He wanted Gaul for Rome, and for a time, it seemed no one could stop him. The Roman army was strong and disciplined, but then, from the heart of Gaul, a young hero arose. His name was Vercingétorix, a name that means great king of warriors. He was a noble from the Arverni tribe, one of the most powerful in central Gaul. He saw the danger that Caesar posed to all the Gallic peoples. He believed that if they did not unite, they would all be defeated, one by one. Vercingétorix was not just a warrior. He was a leader with a vision. He dreamed of a free Gaul, a Gaul where Gauls themselves would rule. This young chieftain possessed a remarkable charisma. He could inspire people with his words and his courage. He traveled across Gaul, urging the tribes to forget their old quarrels. He told them they must fight together against the common enemy, Rome. It was a difficult task. The Gauls were fiercely independent, but Vercingétorix's passion and determination began to win them over. He was a figure of hope in a time of growing despair. His story is one of bravery, strategy, and ultimately, sacrifice. Today, Vercingétorix is remembered as a great hero in France. He is a symbol of resistance against oppression. He represents the spirit of a people fighting for their land and their way of life. His struggle against Julius Caesar is an epic tale. It is a story of courage against overwhelming odds. It is a story that still resonates deeply with the French people. Join us as we uncover the secrets of Vercingétorix, the hero who dared to defy Rome and unite Gaul. Vercingétorix was born around 82 BC. He came from a very important family in Gaul. His tribe, the Arverni, lived in the beautiful Auvergne region of central France. This area is known for its ancient volcanoes and fertile lands. The Arverni were a proud and powerful people. They had a long history of leadership among the Gallic tribes. They were respected for their warriors and their wealth. Vercingétorix grew up surrounded by this tradition of strength and independence. He was destined for a life of importance. His father was named Cheltios. Cheltios was the leader of the Arverni. He was a very ambitious man. He wanted to become king of all Gaul, not just the Arverni. This ambition, however, proved to be his downfall. Other Gallic nobles feared he would become too powerful. They did not want one man to rule over them all. So, Cheltios was accused of trying to establish a monarchy. He was executed by his own people. This must have been a terrible event for young Vercingétorix. He learned early about the dangers of power and the divisions among the Gauls. Despite his father's tragic end, Vercingétorix received the education of a Gallic nobleman. He learned how to ride horses and how to fight. He was trained in the arts of war, which were very important in Gallic society. He also learned about leadership and how to speak persuasively. These skills would become crucial later in his life. He would have listened to the stories of old Gallic heroes. He would have learned about the gods and traditions of his people. He grew up in a world where Roman influence was steadily growing. The Romans were already present in southern Gaul, in a region called Gallia Narbonensis. Caesar's campaigns, starting in 58 BC, brought the Roman legions further north. Vercingétorix would have seen the impact of Rome's expansion. He would have heard about tribes being defeated and Roman rule being imposed. This growing threat surely shaped his views. It likely fueled his desire to protect his people and their way of life. The young Arverni noble was watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to act. The memories of his father and the looming Roman shadow must have weighed heavily on him. By 52 BC, Julius Caesar had been campaigning in Gaul for 6 long years. He had conquered many tribes and seemed unstoppable. Roman rule was becoming harsh. Taxes were heavy and Gallic lands were taken. The Gauls felt their freedom slipping away. Many were angry and resentful. They longed to drive the Romans out. However, the Gallic tribes were often divided. They fought amongst themselves as much as they fought outsiders. This disunity was Caesar's greatest advantage. He could deal with each tribe separately. Vercingétorix, now a young man, saw this situation clearly. He believed that only a united Gallic force could defeat Caesar. He was deeply patriotic and could not stand to see his homeland under Roman domination. He began to speak out. He tried to convince the nobles of his own tribe, the Arverni, to rise against Rome. Initially, he faced resistance. Some Arverni leaders, including his own uncle Gobanitio, were cautious. They feared the power of Rome. They perhaps remembered what happened to Celtius. They expelled Vercingétorix from Gergovia, the Arverni capital. But Vercingétorix was not discouraged. He was a determined leader. He went to the countryside and gathered support from the common people. He spoke to the poor and the discontented warriors. His words were powerful. He reminded them of their ancient freedoms and the injustices of Roman rule. Soon, he had a small army of followers. With this force, he returned to Gergovia. This time, he was successful. He drove out the leaders who opposed him. The Arverni then proclaimed him their chief and gave him their full support. The news of Vercingetorix's actions spread like wildfire across Gaul. It was the spark that ignited a widespread rebellion. Other tribes, weary of Roman oppression, were inspired by the Arverni's stand. They saw in Vercingetorix a leader who could unite them. The Carnutes tribe, for example, massacred Roman merchants in Cenabum, modern Orléans. This was a clear signal that the revolt was serious. Vercingetorix's call to arms had been heard. A great war for the freedom of Gaul was about to begin. The young chieftain was ready to face the might of Rome. Uniting the Gallic tribes was Vercingetorix's greatest challenge, yet also his most significant early achievement. Gaul was a mosaic of over 60 different peoples. Each had its own territory, its own leaders, and often its own ancient rivalries. Some tribes were traditional enemies. Convincing them to fight together under a single commander was an enormous task. It required incredible diplomatic skill, charisma, and a powerful, unifying message. Vercingetorix possessed all of these qualities. He understood that their only hope lay in solidarity. He sent messengers to all corners of Gaul. He called for a great council of Gallic leaders. This meeting took place at Bibracte, a major fortified town of the Aedui tribe. At this assembly, representatives from many tribes gathered. Vercingetorix spoke with passion and conviction. He argued that Caesar aimed to enslave them all. He painted a picture of a future where Gauls would be mere subjects of Rome. He proposed a unified command, with himself as the commander-in-chief. This was a bold move. He was young, and some older chiefs might have resented his ambition. However, the urgency of the situation and Vercingetorix's compelling leadership swayed the assembly. Most tribes agreed to join the rebellion and accepted him as their supreme commander. This was a monumental moment in Gallic history. For the first time, a vast coalition of Gallic peoples stood united against a common foe. Tribes like the Parisii, Senones, Pictones, and many others pledged their warriors to the cause. Only a few, like the Remi and Lingones, remained allied with Caesar. Vercingetorix now had a grand army. As commander-in-chief, Vercingetorix imposed strict discipline. He knew that a loosely organized tribal army would be no match for Caesar's legions. He demanded hostages from each tribe to ensure their loyalty. He standardized punishments for desertion or disobedience. He organized the collection of supplies and weapons. He was creating a real army, not just a temporary alliance of warriors. His ability to forge such unity from such diverse and often conflicting groups was a testament to his extraordinary leadership. The stage was set for a titanic struggle. Section 5. Master of Tactics. Early clashes with Rome. Vercingetorix was not just a charismatic leader, he was also a clever military strategist. He knew he could not defeat Caesar's legions in open, pitched battles. The Romans were masters of that kind of warfare. Their training, discipline, and equipment were superior. So, Vercingetorix decided to fight a different kind of war. He planned to use Gaul's terrain to his advantage. He would harass the Romans, cut off their supplies, and avoid direct confrontations where possible. This was a strategy of attrition, designed to wear down the enemy. One of his key tactics was the scorched earth policy. This meant destroying everything that could be useful to the Roman army. Gallic warriors burned their own villages, towns, and crops. They destroyed bridges and emptied food stores. This was a very hard decision for the Gauls. It meant sacrificing their own homes and livelihoods. But Vercingétorix convinced them it was necessary. He argued that it was better to suffer temporary hardship than to lose their freedom forever. The goal was to starve the Roman army and make it impossible for them to operate deep in Gallic territory. The early stages of the war saw Vercingétorix implementing these strategies. He used his cavalry, which was superior to the Roman cavalry, to launch swift attacks. These raids targeted Roman foraging parties and supply convoys. He tried to pick his battles carefully, fighting only when he had a clear advantage. Caesar himself acknowledged Vercingétorix's skill. The Roman general found himself facing a much more organized and determined enemy than he had encountered before in Gaul. The war was becoming increasingly difficult for the Romans. One significant early event was the siege of Avaricum, which is modern Bourges. This was a large, well-fortified town of the Bituriges tribe. Vercingétorix wanted to burn it as part of his scorched earth policy. However, the Bituriges pleaded to save their beautiful city. Vercingétorix reluctantly agreed. This proved to be a mistake. Caesar besieged Avaricum, and after a long and brutal struggle, captured and sacked it. The Romans massacred almost the entire population. This was a terrible blow for the Gauls, but it also hardened their resolve and showed them the importance of following Vercingétorix's strategy without exception. Section 6. Scorched Earth and the Triumph at Gergovia. The scorched earth policy, or la terre brûlée as it would later be called, was a brutal necessity. Vercingétorix understood that Caesar's legions were like a great machine. This machine needed fuel food for the soldiers and fodder for the horses and pack animals. If he could cut off this fuel, the machine would grind to a halt. So, he ordered his followers to systematically destroy their own resources ahead of the Roman advance. More than 20 towns in the territory of the Bituriges alone were set ablaze in a single day. This was a painful sacrifice for the Gallic people. Imagine the scene: families watching their homes burn, their fields of grain turn to ash. It required immense courage and trust in their leader to carry out such devastating orders. Vercingétorix shared in their suffering. He knew this policy would cause hardship, but he argued passionately that it was the only way to save Gaul. He reminded them that the Romans, if victorious, would take everything anyway. This strategy slowed Caesar's advance. The Romans struggled to find supplies. Their soldiers were often hungry, and their animals weakened. It was a war of endurance. Despite the hardship, the Gauls found a moment of glorious triumph at Gergovia. Gergovia was the main oppidum, or hill fort, of Vercingétorix's own Arverni tribe. It was situated on a high plateau, naturally well defended. Vercingétorix chose this place carefully for a confrontation. In the spring of 52 BC, Caesar laid siege to Gergovia. He tried to capture the heights surrounding the main fort. Vercingétorix used his knowledge of the terrain expertly. He positioned his forces cleverly and launched counterattacks at the right moments. The Roman assaults were repulsed with heavy losses. Caesar, for the first time in the Gallic Wars, suffered a clear personal defeat. He was forced to admit failure and lift the siege. The victory at Gergovia was a huge boost to Gallic morale. It showed that Caesar was not invincible. It proved that Vercingétorix's leadership and strategies could work. More Gallic tribes, including some who had been hesitant, now rallied to Vercingétorix's banner. The rebellion grew stronger. For a moment, it seemed that Gaul might indeed win its freedom. Section 7. The Siege of Alesia. A nation trapped. The victory at Gergovia was a high point for the Gauls, but Julius Caesar was not a man to accept defeat lightly. He was a brilliant and ruthless commander. He learned from his setbacks. After Gergovia, Caesar regrouped his forces. He was joined by his trusted lieutenant, Titus Labienus, who had also won a victory against Gallic forces in the north. Caesar was now more determined than ever to crush Vercingétorix and the Gallic rebellion. He knew that if he did not, all his previous conquests in Gaul could be lost. Vercingétorix, emboldened by Gergovia, decided to gather his main army at Alesia. Alesia was another strongly fortified oppidum, located on a hill and controlled by the Mandubi tribe. He likely chose Alesia because of its strong natural defenses. He hoped to withstand a Roman siege there. He gathered around 80,000 warriors inside Alesia. He also sent out riders to summon a massive relief army from all over Gaul. He believed that if he could hold out, the combined force of the besieged and the relief army could crush Caesar between them. Caesar arrived at Alesia and saw the strength of its position. He decided on an audacious plan. He would not just besiege Alesia, he would build a double line of fortifications around it. The inner line, called a contravallation, was about 16 kilometers long. It was designed to keep Vercingétorix's forces trapped inside Alesia. The outer line, called a circumvallation, was even longer, about 21 kilometers. It was designed to protect the Romans from the expected Gallic relief army. These fortifications were incredible feats of engineering, built quickly by Caesar's disciplined legionaries. They included towers, ditches, ramparts, and hidden traps. The situation inside Alesia soon became desperate. Food began to run out. Vercingétorix had to send away the women, children, and old men from the town to save supplies. He hoped Caesar would let them pass, but Caesar refused. These unfortunate civilians were trapped between the Roman lines and the walls of Alesia, starving to death. Then, the massive Gallic relief army, perhaps numbering over 200,000 men, finally arrived. A series of desperate battles took place. The Gauls inside Alesia attacked the inner Roman line, while the relief army attacked the outer line. The fate of Gaul hung in the balance. Section 8. A fateful surrender, sacrifice for his people. The battles around Alesia were ferocious. For days, the Gauls threw themselves against the Roman fortifications. Vercingétorix and his men fought bravely from within the besieged oppidum. The Gallic relief army, led by other chieftains, launched massive assaults from the outside. Caesar himself rode along his lines, urging his men to hold firm. The Roman soldiers were pushed to their limits, fighting on two fronts simultaneously. There were moments when the Roman lines almost broke. The scale of the fighting was immense, truly a turning point in history. Despite their numbers and their courage, the Gallic relief army could not break through Caesar's formidable siege works. The Roman legions were too disciplined, their defenses too strong. After several days of intense combat, the relief army was defeated and scattered. From the walls of Alesia, Vercingétorix and his warriors watched in despair as their last hope vanished. Inside the oppidum, the situation was now truly hopeless. Starvation was rampant. There was no chance of escape, no chance of further reinforcement. The great Gallic dream was dying. Faced with this terrible reality, Vercingétorix made a courageous and selfless decision. He called a council of his chieftains. According to Caesar's own account, Vercingétorix told them he had fought not for his own gain, but for the freedom of all Gaul. He said he was willing to sacrifice himself to save his people. He offered them two choices. They could kill him and send his head to Caesar to appease the Romans, or they could deliver him alive. He wanted to take responsibility for the war and spare his remaining followers from a massacre. The Gallic chieftains chose to surrender him. The next day, Vercingétorix rode out from Alesia in his finest armor. He approached Julius Caesar, who was seated on a tribunal. In a dramatic gesture, Vercingétorix dismounted, laid down his weapons at Caesar's feet, and surrendered. This act marked the end of the Great Gallic Revolt. It was a moment of profound tragedy for the Gauls, but also a testament to their leader's ultimate sacrifice. He had united them, led them in glorious battle, and now he offered his life to try and save them. Section 9. The enduring legacy of Vercingétorix. After his surrender at Alesia in 52 BC, Vercingétorix's fate was grim. Julius Caesar kept him as a prisoner. For 6 long years, he was held in captivity in Rome, likely in the notorious Tullianum prison. He was a prized trophy of Caesar's Gallic campaigns. In 46 BC, Caesar finally celebrated his official triumph for the conquest of Gaul. Vercingétorix, once the proud leader of a united Gallic army, was paraded through the streets of Rome in chains as part of Caesar's victory procession. It was a humiliating end for the Gallic hero. Shortly after the triumph, he was executed, probably by strangulation. For many centuries, Vercingétorix was largely forgotten. The Romans wrote the history, and they focused on Caesar's victories. Gaul became a Roman province and, over time, adopted Roman language and culture. However, in the 19th century, France experienced a resurgence of national identity. historians and writers began to look for heroes from France's pre-Roman past. They rediscovered Vercingétorix. He became a powerful symbol of French patriotism, resistance against invaders, and the idea of a unified nation. His story resonated deeply during times when France itself faced threats or occupation. Vercingétorix's image was transformed into that of a national hero. Napoleon III, Emperor of the French, played a key role in this revival. He commissioned archaeological excavations at Alesia, Sainte-Reine, in Burgundy, and erected a monumental statue of Vercingétorix there in 1865. The statue, created by Aimé Millet, with its famous inscription, Gaul United, forming a single nation, animated by a common spirit, can defy the universe, became an iconic representation of the Gallic chieftain. This image of the long-haired, mustachioed warrior became famous. Today, Vercingétorix remains a significant figure in French culture and collective memory. He appears in history textbooks, comics like Asterix, where he is an anachronistic inspiration, films, and popular imagination. He symbolizes courage, the fight for freedom, and the refusal to submit to overwhelming power. Though his rebellion ultimately failed, his effort to unite the disparate Gallic tribes against a common enemy left a lasting mark. He stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance and the timeless quest for liberty, a true hero from the dawn of French history.